I woke up before sunrise with a smile on my face. Today wasn't just another day. It was our 7th wedding anniversary. For weeks, I had planned everything in secret. I wanted Sophia to come home and feel loved the moment she walked through the front door. I stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while bacon sizzled beside me. This time, I whispered to myself, smiling, I'm going to surprise her. The smell of fresh coffee filled the house. I looked around our dining room and nodded with satisfaction. Fresh flowers, candles, our favorite songs ready on the speaker. And in the center of the table sat a small gift box with a silver ribbon. Inside was a necklace she had admired months ago but never bought. I remembered exactly what she had said. It's beautiful, but it's too expensive. I smiled as I picked up the box. Not anymore, I said quietly. My phone buzzed. The screen showed her name. I answered immediately. Happy anniversary, sweetheart. There was a long silence. Then she sighed. Ethan, I'm sorry. My smile faded. Sorry? For what? I completely forgot. I laughed softly. Nice joke. I'm serious. The room suddenly felt colder. I had an emergency meeting. You forgot our anniversary? I know how it sounds. Then explain it. Another pause. I'm already at the airport. I frowned. The airport? My flight is boarding. What flight? I'm going to Paris. I froze. Paris? It's a business project. Business? Victor asked me to join him. I tightened my grip on the phone. Victor Hayes? Yes. Your old boss? Yes. For how long? About 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I couldn't even breathe. And you didn't tell me? It happened fast. Sophia, I'm really sorry. No. She stayed quiet. No, you're not sorry. Ethan, you packed your bags. Yes. You booked a flight. Yes. You got your passport. Yes. And somehow you forgot to tell your husband? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I didn't want us to argue before I left. I laughed, but there wasn't any happiness in it. So your solution was to disappear? It isn't that simple. It feels pretty simple from where I'm standing. I'll make it up to you. How? When I come home, I looked at the anniversary cake, waiting on the table, the candles, the flowers, the gift. Everything suddenly looked foolish. I spent weeks planning today. I know. No, you don't. I'm sorry. They're calling my flight. I have to go. Sophia? What? Did our marriage become that unimportant? She didn't answer. The line went silent. Then the call ended. I stood there, staring at my phone, hoping it would ring again. It never did. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. Every morning, I looked at the empty side of our bed and told myself the same lie. She's coming home. Everything will be normal again. I wanted to believe it. Maybe I needed to believe it. The day Sophia finally returned, I stood outside our house waiting for her. A taxi stopped in front of the driveway. She stepped out wearing expensive clothes I had never seen before. She smiled as if nothing had happened. Ethan! She wrapped her arms around me. I missed you so much. I hugged her back, but something inside me didn't move. She opened her suitcase with excitement. Look what I brought you. She handed me a luxury watch. And these chocolates are from Paris. Then she pulled out a designer jacket. I thought this would look perfect on you. I forced a smile. They're beautiful. Aren't you happy? I am. But I wasn't. No gift could replace the anniversary we never celebrated. No expensive watch could buy back the night I spent alone staring at an untouched cake. Over dinner, I tried to smile. So, how was Paris? She looked away for a second. It was busy. Did you get any time to enjoy the city? Not really. What about Victor? She took a sip of water before answering. He was busy too. That answer felt too short, too careful. I told myself I was imagining things. A few days later, I noticed something strange. Her phone was never out of her hand. If it rang, she walked into another room. If I walked in, she locked the screen immediately. One evening I smiled and asked, "Who's texting you so much?" She laughed nervously. Just work. Work at 9 o'clock? People work late. I was only asking. She suddenly frowned. Do I need permission to answer messages now? I blinked. No. Then stop acting like you're checking up on me. I'm not. She stood up and carried her plate to the sink without another word. I sat there, wondering how such a simple question had turned into an argument. The silence between us felt heavier than any shouting ever could. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. Every morning, I looked at the empty side of our bed and told myself the same lie. She's coming home. Everything will be normal again. I wanted to believe it. Maybe I needed to believe it. The day Sophia finally returned, I stood outside our house waiting for her. A taxi stopped in front of the driveway. She stepped out wearing expensive clothes I had never seen before. She smiled as if nothing had happened. Ethan! She wrapped her arms around me. I missed you so much. I hugged her back, but something inside me didn't move. She opened her suitcase with excitement. Look what I brought you. She handed me a luxury watch. And these chocolates are from Paris. Then she pulled out a designer jacket. I thought this would look perfect on you. I forced a smile. They're beautiful. Aren't you happy? I am. But I wasn't. No gift could replace the anniversary we never celebrated. No expensive watch could buy back the night I spent alone staring at an untouched cake. Over dinner, I tried to smile. So, how was Paris? She looked away for a second. It was busy. Did you get any time to enjoy the city? Not really. What about Victor? She took a sip of water before answering. He was busy too. That answer felt too short, too careful. I told myself I was imagining things. A few days later, I noticed something strange. Her phone was never out of her hand. If it rang, she walked into another room. If I walked in, she locked the screen immediately. One evening I smiled and asked, "Who's texting you so much?" She laughed nervously. Just work. Work at 9 o'clock? People work late. I was only asking. She suddenly frowned. Do I need permission to answer messages now? I blinked. No. Then stop acting like you're checking up on me. I'm not. She stood up and carried her plate to the sink without another word. I sat there, wondering how such a simple question had turned into an argument. The silence between us felt heavier than any shouting ever could. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't ask Sophia why. Some questions no longer mattered once the truth was standing in front of me. I walked back into the hospital room and looked at her quietly. She was sitting on the bed with tears running down her face. Ethan, I didn't answer. Please say something. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I asked the only question left in my heart. Is the baby mine? She closed her eyes. The silence answered before her lips ever could. When she finally spoke, her voice barely came out. No, that single word ended 7 years of marriage. I'm sorry, she whispered. It wasn't supposed to happen. I nodded slowly, but it did. She reached for my hand. It was a mistake. I gently stepped back. No, Sophia, it only happened once. It happened enough. She broke into tears. Victor told me he loved me. I stared at her. And you believed him. He promised he would leave his wife. I couldn't help smiling. Not because it was funny, because it hurt too much. So you traded our marriage for a promise. I never wanted to hurt you. You already did. I still love you. I looked straight into her eyes. If you loved me, you wouldn't have forgotten our anniversary. She started crying even harder. If you loved me, I continued, you wouldn't have hidden your phone. If you loved me, you wouldn't be carrying another man's child. She covered her face with both hands. I'm so sorry. I took one slow breath. I believe you are. But being sorry doesn't change what happened. Without another word, I turned around and walked out of the room. She called after me. Ethan. I didn't stop. Please don't leave me. I kept walking, because the man who would have turned around didn't exist anymore. People say time heals every wound. I don't think that's true. Time doesn't heal you. It only gives you the chance to decide whether you will keep bleeding or finally stand up. 6 months had passed since I walked away from my marriage. The divorce was final. The papers were signed. The house was sold. And the man I used to be no longer existed. One Saturday morning, my mother looked at me over breakfast. "You've been hiding from the world long enough." "I'm not hiding." She smiled gently. "Ethan, staying inside every day isn't living. I don't know how to start again." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to rebuild your whole life today." "Then what do I do?" "Help someone." I frowned. Help someone. When you lift another person, you often lift yourself too. Her words stayed with me all day. The following week, I walked into a small community charity center. A woman greeted me with a warm smile. "Hi, you must be Ethan." I'm Emma Collins." She held out her hand. "Thank you for volunteering." I shook it. "I've never done anything like this before." She laughed softly. "Neither had I when I started." "So what do I do?" "We help people." "That's it. That's enough." For the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. Over the next few weeks, I packed food boxes, carried furniture for struggling families, and listened to people whose lives had completely fallen apart. One afternoon, Emma handed me 2 cups of coffee. "You look different." "In a good way?" "I think so. I still think about my old life every day." "That's normal. I keep wondering what I did wrong." She looked at me carefully. "Not every broken relationship means you failed." I stayed quiet. "You love someone," she continued. "That's never something to be ashamed of." Her words hit me harder than she realized. She wasn't asking me to forget. She was teaching me how to keep living. For the first time since the hospital, I believed that maybe healing wasn't impossible. Some people think karma arrives with loud thunder. In my life, it arrived quietly. One rainy evening, my phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "Hello, Ethan, it's me." I recognized Sophia's voice immediately. She sounded different, not confident, not proud, just broken. "What do you want?" There was a long silence. "Can we talk?" "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please." I closed my eyes. "I only need a few minutes." After another long pause, I finally said, "Come over." An hour later, someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, I barely recognized her. The expensive clothes were gone. The confident smile had disappeared. Her face looked pale. Her eyes were swollen from crying. And beneath her loose coat, her pregnancy was impossible to hide. She looked at me with trembling lips. "Hi." I stepped aside. "Come in." She entered slowly and looked around the small apartment. "It's nice." I didn't answer. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. Finally, she whispered, "Victor left me." I wasn't surprised. "When?" "2 months ago." I stayed quiet. "He said the investigations ruined everything." She looked down at her hands. "Then he packed his bags. And he told me the baby wasn't his responsibility anymore." I stared at her. "So he walked away?" She nodded as fresh tears filled her eyes. "I begged him to stay." "And he didn't?" "No." She wiped her face. "I finally know what it feels like." "What?" "To be abandoned by someone you trusted." Her words hung in the room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she looked directly at me. "I'm sorry, Ethan." "I know." "No, you don't." "I think I do." "I lied." "Yes." "I betrayed you." "Yes." "I destroyed our marriage." I nodded once. "Yes." She broke down crying. I would do anything to change it. I felt my chest tighten, because despite everything, I could still see pieces of the woman I had once loved. But love and trust were no longer the same thing. She reached across the table. "Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at her trembling hand. Then I quietly answered, "I already have." She looked up in surprise. "You have?" "Yes." Hope suddenly filled her eyes. "Then maybe we can start again." I slowly shook my head. Her smile disappeared. "Ethan, I forgave you so I could move forward." I took a deep breath before continuing. But forgiveness isn't the same as going back. She stared at me in silence. I can't rebuild a life on broken promises. The tears returned to her eyes. I understand. For the first time, I believe she finally did. There was a time when I believed my story had ended the day my marriage fell apart. I was wrong. That day wasn't my ending. It was my beginning. Almost a year had passed since I walked away from the hospital. The pain hadn't completely disappeared. Some mornings, it still found me before the alarm clock did. But now, it no longer controlled me. One afternoon, Emma walked into the charity office carrying a folder. "Ethan." I looked up from my desk. "Busy?" "Always." She smiled. "Good." She placed a folder in front of me. "What's this?" "Our numbers." I opened it. My eyes widened. "We've helped more than 300 families?" Emma nodded proudly. "And that's only this year." I leaned back in my chair. I never imagined any of this. She folded her arms and laughed softly. "I did." "You did." "The first day you walked through our doors, you spent 3 hours helping strangers before you even asked where the coffee machine was." I smiled. "I remember that." I knew then that your heart had become hard. It felt broken. It was... She sat across from me. But broken hearts understand broken people better than anyone else. Her words stayed with me long after she left the room. A few days later, Lily stopped by the office carrying lunch. She looked around at the volunteers with a huge smile. "I'm proud of you." "For eating sandwiches?" She laughed. "No, for this." She pointed around the room. "You built something beautiful." "I didn't build it alone." "Maybe not." She looked directly into my eyes. "But you've changed." "I hope that's a good thing." "It is." "How?" She smiled warmly. "You smile differently now." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "Before, you smiled because life was easy." She paused. "Now you smile because you're strong." For a moment, I couldn't speak. She was right. My happiness no longer depended on someone else choosing me. It came from finally choosing myself. That realization felt more valuable than anything I had ever owned. 1 year can change a person's entire life. A year ago, I was standing in a hospital hallway, wondering how my world had fallen apart. Today, I stood on a stage looking at hundreds of smiling faces. Behind me, a large banner read, "Hope Begins Again Foundation Annual Charity Gala." I took a slow breath and smiled. Emma walked over carrying 2 bottles of water. "Nervous?" "A little." She laughed. "You've spoken in front of crowds before." "Not this big." She handed me a bottle. "You'll do great." I looked around the hall. Families filled every table. Volunteers hurried from one side of the room to the other. Children laughed near the stage. For the first time in years, my heart felt light. Emma gently touched my shoulder. "Ready?" I nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The announcer smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of Hope Begins Again Foundation, Ethan Brooks." The audience applauded. I stepped onto the stage. For a moment, I couldn't say anything. Not because I was afraid, because I remembered the man I used to be, a man who believed his life had ended after betrayal. I smiled into the microphone. "Thank you all for being here." The room became completely quiet. A few years ago, I lost almost everything. I paused. I thought pain would define the rest of my life. Several people nodded, but I learned something. I looked toward Emma. When someone breaks your heart, I smiled softly. You still get to decide whether they break your future. The audience applauded. I continued speaking about hope, about healing, about choosing kindness instead of bitterness. When the speech ended, everyone stood and clapped. As I stepped off the stage, Emma hugged me. "You were amazing." "I survived." She laughed. "No." She looked into my eyes. "You inspired people." Before I could answer, my attention shifted toward the entrance. A familiar figure stood quietly near the back of the room. Sophia. She wasn't dressed in expensive clothes anymore. There were no bodyguards, no luxury handbags, no confidence hiding behind success. She simply held a small boy in her arms. Noah. For a long moment, our eyes met across the crowded hall. Neither of us moved. Then she gave me a small, respectful smile. Not the smile of someone asking for another chance. The smile of someone finally accepting the past. I slowly walked toward her. She looked down at Noah before speaking. Congratulations, Ethan. Thank you. She glanced around the room. You built something incredible. We built it. I looked back toward Emma, who was talking with volunteers nearby. Sophia followed my eyes. I'm happy for you. I believed her. For the first time, there were no lies between us.